September 1944. The US Army believed the war in Europe was almost over. Paris had been liberated. German forces were retreating. High Command began to talk about victory, maybe even by Christmas, but there was one place standing in the way: a forest. Not just any forest, but 50 square miles of dense, ancient woodland along the German border. A place so dark that sunlight barely touched the ground. A place where visibility dropped to a few feet, and sound carried in strange, unnatural ways. The soldiers who entered it would later give it a name: the Green Hell, and many of them would never come out the same. The Hürtgen Forest didn't look like a battlefield. There were no open fields, no clear objectives, no visible enemy lines. Just trees, endless rows of towering pine trees, packed so tightly together that they formed a natural wall. The ground beneath them was uneven, muddy and covered in roots and hidden rocks. It swallowed everything: sound, light, direction. Even time itself seemed to slow down inside those woods. And the Germans knew exactly how to use it. For years they had prepared this forest as part of the Siegfried Line, a massive defensive system designed to stop any invasion into Germany. But they didn't just build bunkers. They turned the forest itself into a weapon. Hidden artillery positions, camouflaged machine gun nests, minefields buried under mud and leaves. Every inch of ground was calculated. Every path was watched, and every American soldier who stepped into those woods was already being observed. At first, the advance seemed possible. Units were ordered to push through the forest, clear German resistance, and secure key towns like Schmidt. On paper, it made sense. In reality, it was a nightmare. Movement was painfully slow. Tanks couldn't maneuver between the trees. Vehicles were forced onto narrow logging trails, long muddy corridors that turned into death traps. If one vehicle was destroyed, everything behind it stopped. And when that happened, the Germans opened fire from above, from hidden ridges, from positions no one could even see. But that wasn't the worst part. Not even close. Rain began to fall, and it didn't stop. Days turned into weeks of cold, relentless downpour. The ground became a swamp of thick mud that sucked boots off soldiers' feet. Uniforms stayed wet for days. Skin began to rot. Trench foot spread rapidly through the ranks. Men weren't being evacuated because they were wounded. They were being pulled out because they could no longer walk. Sleep became impossible, not because of orders, but because of fear. The forest never went quiet. There was always something. Branches cracking, wind moving through the trees, distant artillery echoing through the woods in ways that made it impossible to tell where it came from. Some soldiers began to feel like they weren't alone, even when they were. And then came the artillery. German forces had perfected a tactic that would define the horror of Hürtgen. They didn't aim for the ground. They aimed for the trees. When an artillery shell exploded high above the forest floor, it didn't just send metal shrapnel downward. It shattered the treetops. And in an instant, those trees became weapons. Thousands of razor-sharp wooden splinters exploded outward and downward at high speed. Men hiding in foxholes, the very place meant to protect them, suddenly found themselves trapped in a storm of flying wood and steel. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Soldiers were being impaled, not by bullets, but by the forest itself. Veterans would later say that the sound was the worst part. The crack of splitting wood, the rain of debris, the screams, all blending together into something they could never forget. Some of them described it as if the forest was alive, as if it was screaming, and slowly, it began to break them. Men stopped talking, not because they were told to, but because something inside them shut down. They sat in mud-filled foxholes, staring into the gray fog, waiting. Not for orders, But for the next explosion, then came one of the most devastating moments of the entire campaign: the advance toward the town of Schmidt. To reach it, American forces had to move through a narrow route known as the Kull Trail. It was barely wide enough for vehicles, steep, slippery, exposed, and completely under German observation. It was a trap. As units from the 28th Infantry Division, known as the Bloody Bucket, moved forward, everything began to collapse. Tanks slid off the sides of the trail into ravines. Supply lines broke down, communication failed, and German forces opened fire from elevated positions. There was no cover, no escape. In just a matter of days, the division was shattered. Over 6,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing. Entire companies disappeared. Out of hundreds who entered the forest, only a handful came back, and still, the orders didn't stop. Officially, the objective was strategic: control the Roer River dams, prevent the Germans from flooding the region, and slowing the Allied advance. That was the explanation, but many who were there began to question it. Because while thousands of American soldiers were being ground down inside the forest, German forces were preparing something else. Behind the cover of Hürtgen, they were massing troops, reorganizing, planning. Just weeks later, they would launch one of the most powerful counterattacks of the entire war, the Battle of the Bulge, which raised a question that still lingers today. Was Hürtgen Forest really necessary? Or was it a deadly distraction that cost thousands of lives for almost no strategic gain? By November, the situation had become even worse. The rain turned to snow. The mud froze. The green hell became a frozen wasteland. Cold began to kill just as effectively as bullets. Frostbite, pneumonia, exhaustion. Supplies struggled to reach the front lines. Men ate cold rations with shaking hands. Some hadn't slept properly in days. Others simply stopped reacting. There are accounts of medics working non-stop for over 48 hours. One of them described the forest as a place where God had turned his back. He treated men with missing limbs, only to watch them die minutes later from exposure. By the time the battle finally ended in February 1945, the numbers were staggering. Over 33,000 American casualties. For a stretch of forest, the ground was destroyed. Torn apart by artillery, filled with craters, debris, and bodies that were never fully recovered. And for the men who survived, the battle didn't end when they left. Many carried it with them for the rest of their lives. They couldn't stand the sound of wind moving through trees, couldn't sleep in dark rooms. Some refused to ever enter a forest again. Even today, the Hürtgen Forest looks peaceful. The trees have grown back. The trails are quiet. But sometimes, the ground gives something back. A rusted helmet, a broken rifle, a dog tag, reminders of what happened there. Because the truth is, this wasn't just a battle. It was a place where modern war collided with something far more primitive, where technology failed, where strategy broke down, and where the environment itself became the enemy. If you had been there, walking into that forest, hearing those trees crack above you, would you have followed those orders, or would you have turned back? Because thousands didn't get that choice, and some of them never really left that forest.